longest?
I'll be happy to. We came to South Brunswick, it was September 1940, and settled on a poultry farm, which had, at that time, I believe 3,000 chickens, laying hens, which allowed us to make my dad and mother, a livelihood. At that particular time, I was 16 years old and attended Jamesburg High School, since we had no high school in South Brunswick. As time went on, I worked in a machine shop to help support the family and put food on the table. Things were a little rough yet. World War II broke out and entered the military, which meant that Mom and Dad had to carry the farm pretty much on their own, since my brother also entered the military in 1940, 44, 43, 44. And
you were in the Navy.
I happened to be in the Navy. Hans happened to be in the paratroopers, airborne. Anyway, when the war ended and we built the farm production up to 15,000 laying hens, which was one of the largest poultry farms, I think, in the state of New Jersey at that time. One of the large poultry farms, not the largest. I take that back. Which created the egg business, since Hans decided, couldn't make up his mind what he wanted to do for his future, so he wound up selling eggs. Dad took him on a route and they built the egg business. And that got us all into the egg business rather than egg production, which still remained. So Triploff Poultry Farm was the name that we had created, developed into one of the larger egg distribution setups in the state of New Jersey. We were quite a factor in the state of New Jersey as egg purveyors, egg distributors to all the major chain stores, mama and papa stores, the military and state institutions. We've served most of those at the time. And that began the history in South Brunswick for us. We started, Dad, since we're Jewish, began the local synagogue in Deans, New Jersey, with quite a number of poultry farmers at that time that settled in South Brunswick.
And that was located, where was that located?
Deans.
Right?
Old George's Road.
Old George's Road in Deans. And which is no longer that today, since the congregation merged with several others and formed South Brunswick and North Brunswick community called B'nai Tikva. The original one in Deans was called Shari Shalom. Anyway.
Go back one further, it was the Jewish Farmers Community Center. Originally.
In Deans.
Indeed,
yeah.
Right.
Made up of 90% farmers, which the makeup changed. Today it's no longer any farmers to speak of.
The original
locality.
The original charter read that 80% of the members of the Jewish Farmers Community Center had to be farmers. So that, I don't know what they were trying to prevent coming in, but that was the original charter that read that way.
As the growth in South Brunswick continued, that was no longer possible, and the poultry farm industry changed dramatically, where New Jersey was practically out of business as far as poultry farming was concerned. Other areas in the country took it over. Since there was newer methods, more modern, required to stay in that industry. It It was 1958 where we shut down the farm operation and only remained in the distribution of eggs. So we purchased other farmers' production and graded and packaged the eggs and then distributed to various outlets. Those, yes.
And were there farmers still in South Brunswick? No farmers? Where did you?
Yeah, the farmers remained
Source.
in South Brunswick, I think, till the early 60s actually, is where it became impossible to compete in the marketplace. Egg prices had not changed from the 40s to the 60s, and probably very little to the 90s. So it was impossible for the people to continue making a livelihood on their production. We had people in the South, Georgia, Florida, and so on, that began having new facilities with anywhere as a minimum of 300 to 1 million birds. Well, that wasn't possible in New Jersey economically, because the land was too expensive, the labor was too expensive, which ruled out producing eggs. Backing up to 1940s, as we developed our egg business, we lost Dad in 1949. So we carried the business on and developed more and grew continuously. But we missed Dad, since he was a vital part of the business in those days. In 1950, I met Sue in 1949 while Dad was still alive, and we got married in 1950. So I'm going to let Sue take over, tell you more about the future.
I came to South Brunswick in 1950, very happily, because I was originally a city girl. But during my years in Great Britain during the war, I learned to love the country, and my dream was to live in the country someday, never dreaming that it would come true. And I moved to South Brunswick. Our first house was on George's Road, just over the Dayton line, although it was still Monmouth Junction. And as I said, it was a dream come true. My mother used to come out from the city and say, "Are you sure you're happy here?" And I said, "I wouldn't change it for anything." Knew nothing about chickens. Was afraid of the chickens, actually. But soon got used to it. I first lived with, as I said, before I moved into my house, I'd lived with my mother-in-law for, about 4 months. And then, because my foster father was coming from England, she said, you have to have him in your house. You've got to be the hostess. And so, as I said, moved into the house on George's Road. Quickly learned about poultry, but I'd been a bookkeeper, and so I took over some of the chores of bookkeeping from my mother-in-law. We had no local stores to shop in South Brunswick, in Monmouth Junction, so it was a weekly shopping trip to New Brunswick, to either the A&P or the food fair, and the shopping for the whole family. My brother-in-law Hans had an egg route in Highland Park, and I was designated to go shopping. Mom hated shopping. We had Young's store on the corner for the newspapers or loaf of bread, or some groceries, but the main part was done once a week. We bought a freezer. That was sort of a necessity. The end of 1950 to us here on the farm, because we had a hurricane in Monmouth Junction, South Brunswick. took the roof off the chicken coops, almost took the roof off the house, and we had no electricity for, I think it was 2 weeks. We lived in my mother-in-law's kitchen with the gas stove going, and cleaned our eggs there and did the best that we could. But Monmouth Junction, South Brunswick, to me has always been home and a wonderful community. Once my children came along, they started out in Dayton school. The bus picked them up, and it was a big excitement for them to go on the bus and go to school. The schools were generally quite good. As Walt said, we were still a sending district to Jamesburg for many, many years until we got our own high school. We fought politically and educationally for a lot of things that newcomers into the township wanted. You wanted better education, you wanted better government, you wanted roads or police protection, and all the things that a growing township needed. And so we all became involved. And it was a wonderful camaraderie. And friendships still remain. People have moved from the township, but the friendships and the memories still remain. One of them is as Harold Leary, for instance, who ran for school board many years ago, and I remember campaigning for him, and it's been a long-lasting friendship. And when we get together, it's always reminiscing about the things in the township that were good and that were bad. We grew in the township. Kendall Park came in. It was them. And we were sort of the wrong side of the tracks. The vote was very lopsided many times. And Kendall Park was blamed for passing issues that the rest of the township didn't want. Came time to build a new high school. We canvassed door to door to door to get the high school. And the older members of the township just didn't think that certain things were necessary. They were probably right in their own way. They had lived with this for years, and it was fine. Why change? But change came, and as I said, the high school came into existence. Our school system grew, our school system improved, and today it is one of the best in the state. We have people moving into South Brunswick from areas because South Brunswick has an excellent school system, and that speaks well for it. Industry-wise, of course, we have grown religiously in all areas. There was a wonderful little Catholic church we called up on the hill. Very homey, a lovely little place. Now, the diocese has grown, and I live across the street from a very big Catholic church, which has, I think, 5 masses on a Sunday morning, which was unheard of. The Presbyterian churches have grown. You know, I see it here. And yet somehow the flavor of the township is still there. There is still certain closeness. Kingston Lane, for instance, when I moved, I was the third house on Kingston Lane originally, Then I was the 4th house on Kingston Lane from the corner. Now I'm the 5th house because a house was recently moved. An old house was moved because the property was bought by Pierre. Then we knew just about everybody on Kingston Lane who lived there. And we still do. It's, and there too is a sort of a camaraderie. Now there is a new street in back of me, and it's called Duchess Lane. And just recently, 3 of the children came to my house and said, "Would you be interested in having a block party next year?" I said, "How wonderful. Of course I would. Be happy to." So there again, there is still that closeness in South Brunswick Township. Walt and I go to California in the wintertime.
Oh, he would have to, yes.
But the roots are here
Why would you leave
in South Brunswick, in Monmouth Junction. And Frank exhibit last year again proved how close we were. Hundreds and hundreds of people came out to help and to support it. Now we have the bicentennial coming up, and again we see the camaraderie of the township, of the people, coming together because they want that celebration. I'm going to really miss being here this winter for the beginning of it, because I'm part of it. I would love as I say, my house in the country back, because when I first moved into this house in 1956, I looked across the field and I looked to the woods, and the deer would be out there in the fall. It was a lovely sight. Now, unfortunately, I have houses, but that's all right too. That's all part of it. My children come back here and enjoy. My oldest daughter is in Seattle, Washington. She graduated South Brunswick High School in 1969. And I must tell you one thing about that. We visited in Seattle, and she said to me, "Mom, I've got to take you and show you something." What did she have to show me? A building that was the twin of Dayton School. She was just so delighted to find it. And it was a school originally, and they made it into little shops, little boutiques. But it's the twin of Dayton School, and she was just so excited to find this school. So you see, she also has roots back here. It's funny. It's it's just something that happens.
Well, he didn't have that.
So, but South Brunswick, Monmouth Junction has been a wonderful place to live. Is a wonderful place to live. Getting older, we keep thinking, well, we should move into something smaller. But that's hard to give up. It's hard to do because it's our home. The people that we enjoy and we like are here. Our son is in South Jersey, and also he still has friends here. He went to school with Michael Dowden, with Donnie Rodner. These were his classmates, his schoolmates, and he's still happy to say hi to them when he's here. And Debbie did not, our youngest did not graduate from South Brunswick, but she went to South Brunswick to 6th grade. She went to high school at Rutgers Prep. But still, it's her home here. I will miss now with the high school gone from across the street. I'm going to miss the march. People say, "Oh, it's a noise," and I said, I enjoy listening to the marching band. I mean, that's all part and parcel of it.
I know,
Uh,
I know. Well,
The kids have changed, yes. The times changed, so I guess we have to roll with the punches. Our form of government has been explored. Are we going to change from what we have now? We shall see. And of course there is still the Democratic and Republican parties that are fighting and always will. We have our school board fights,
That's good.
and it's good. That's part of it. We have a wonderful police force. Do their job well. Whether we like it or whether we don't, we still have our first police chief